All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the final session of GCon Admin Day. This is our Google Apps Admin Roundtable. I'm joined by three Google Apps admins who are admins at organizations of varying sizes and types. So I want to go ahead and introduce everybody real quick. First, that we have David Malone from the San Francisco Unified School District.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And we have Andy Serotuk from Cadillac Fairview.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
And lastly, Kevin Morey from ClearChoice.
Hello, everybody.
This, like I mentioned, this is a very different session than the other two that we had today. We're going to try and keep it a little bit informal. There's not a super structured agenda for this session. We have some questions that I'm going to direct specifically to the three panelists here, and then we'll have some just general open questions that we'll want to get into. So with that, I want to go a little bit more in depth with our introductions here. David, I'll go ahead and start with you. Can you tell us what your role is at San Francisco Unified School District? Also, when and why you guys decided to move to Google Apps?
Okay. So my title is a new title. It's a Google Apps for Education Deployment Architect, but I also help with deployments for iPads and other devices as well. But my primary function is in the Google sphere. Our district went Google sort of about a year ago. Believe it or not, San Francisco didn't have Google Apps on an official basis as of this time last year. We had about 20 or 30 rogue domains, like a lot of districts do, and we finally made the push to kind of, unite the clans, if you will. So that was kind of a really slow rollout about this time last year. So we automatically gave accounts to every entering student, existing student, all staff members, all teachers. So we have about 67,000 users in the domain. Not a lot of people knew it was there, but it was there. So we started using it. We tried to migrate a few domains and take a that mess. But the big push came. So we have like Chromebooks now. So before, we couldn't even purchase a Chromebook in our district, but we had about 600 or 700 unmanaged devices in the district. So it was a big push last year to get those SBAC compliant, lots of requests for that. Not many people knowing exactly what being compliant meant on the Chrome platform. And without a domain, without management, that's not really possible. So that was my proof of concept to get those enrolled. So I manually enrolled about 700 devices myself in a couple weeks, and there were very minimal problems when the piloting for testing went out. And now we have upwards, I think, of 3,600 devices in the district. And I think last count about 63 schools. So that's pretty impressive that just the past 2 months we've rolled out about 3,000 devices, and with very minimal support. They're white gloved by R.E. Jones and deployed to the schools and just put in suborgs. It's a thing of beauty. But the thing about Google is we really I have an educator background. I have a master's in education. I've been in classrooms for about a decade now. But just having that platform that isn't device specific was really key from my perspective. We have iPads and Windows, and we have some Linux machines somewhere. We have Macs and now Chromebooks, and it's nice to know that no matter what instruction is given or what tasks are given by a teacher, there's a continuity of experience. So even if we have lower income students that can't afford a laptop or a computer, can actually work on a smartphone or go to the library or something like that. So just access to things no matter where you are, and data over devices was really the key push for us, and Chromebooks are kind of.
So would you say, this is kind of the chicken or the egg question, would you say the reason behind the move to Google Apps was to help manage this device rollout that you had, or was it you wanted to encourage widespread use of devices, and Google Apps was the best way to do that?
Well, I want to encourage collaboration, creativity, and I don't think there's any tool out there really that is so geared towards the needs of teachers and students than Google Apps for education. So that was my primary goal, and the Chromebooks were just they were kind of like the way to kind of get in the door. Like say what you will about online testing and the smarter balance and all that kind of stuff. It's getting a lot of devices into students' hands, and it doesn't really matter what those devices are if you have a Google Apps platform, the foundation. So a little bit of a tangent. I was doing teacher trainings last year to classrooms of teachers from different schools showing them Google Apps and that kind of stuff. And later in the year, I actually did a show of hands, like who had Google Apps at their school, and no one raised their hands. So it was sort of like I was doing trainings on devices and a platform that didn't exist yet. So kind of a chicken or egg sort of thing. So I shifted my focus to work more on the IT end, because without that, nothing else is possible. So, but I've looked at 365 and other tools, and I just thought for collaboration, and it's a tool that just teachers and students just take to it naturally. It's a tool they're already kind of using. So very minimal training, at least, on that end. So it's a way to go scale very, very quickly.
Exactly. I think you probably touched on a few of your successes already with Google Apps, but maybe you could mention what's been the biggest challenge for you guys from the point where you started the move to Google Apps to where you are today.
I'd say big challenge, just to give you a little bit of inside information here. It was kind of a grassroots movement. It was kind of different than most districts do. Sometimes there's a top-level superintendent does a mandate and everyone starts using the tool, and we didn't do that. This is more of a let's get the kids doing amazing things and hopefully it'll snowball to something else. So, for example, we don't even have Gmail turned on. Right. So we have Gmail turned on for intranet communications, for to do scripts and add-ons and notifications, that kind of stuff. But you can't receive or send email outside the domain. So it's extremely difficult to deploy something of that scale without email.
Right.
We have a subdomain, 2 different logins, getting that buy-in. Why do I need to check a second thing? Why do I have 2 mail accounts? That kind of stuff. So for us, that Gmail hurdle has been difficult for the buy-in. But even with very minimal promotion, we have about 12,000 active users on a weekly basis. That's about 20%. That's huge for really doing nothing. So if we can eventually address the Gmail thing, and maybe there are talks of maybe that being a possibility, I think adoption is going to go through the roof. So,
great. Well, thank you, David. All right, so next we're going to move on to Andy. Andy Serwaduk, like I mentioned, he's at Cadillac Fairview. Same thing, Andy, if you could just tell us your position at Cadillac Fairview and when and why they decided to move to Google Apps. I almost forgot, wanted to mention, Andy's one of our Google Guru contributors, so you may have heard his voice before on a couple of our videos, so we really appreciate him helping out there.
Trying to put together a few more of those videos. I'll get to it one day. So at Cadillac Fairview, they switched, I think it's just over 2 years ago. My job here is just applications administrator, Google Apps. Before it was a little bit of a split role. The driving force behind switching to Google Apps was they were a Lotus Notes shop here. They wanted something a little bit more, well, they wanted something cheaper, for one thing. Like maintaining Lotus Notes, licensing, and the server maintenance and all that kind of stuff was pretty cost heavy. So they wanted something a little bit easier on the wallet. Because of the nature of the business of Cadillac Fairview, property management company, we're spread out all over the country, and it's just not feasible to maintain servers all over the place just to get a decent sort of experience for the users within their email. So Google Apps is kind of the perfect solution. There was a real push for moving stuff to the cloud. So that's the VP at the time decided that Google Apps was kind of the way to go. I wasn't here for that decision. I could tell you if I was, I probably would have pushed in the same direction. My previous employer, I was doing Google Apps administration there. They brought me in just to switch over to Google Apps, and I was there for 5 years. We did that back in 2009. It was kind of the same idea. I'm forgetting what your second question was.
I think I hadn't gotten to the second question, actually. That's why. That's the tricky part about giving the agenda beforehand. So I was going to ask, and since you're fairly new to Cadillac Fairview, you can kind of apply this to your past experience with Google Apps. But same thing we asked David. Your biggest success and challenges with Google Apps.
I think in any business with switching to Google Apps, I think your biggest challenge, and it's no different at Cadillac Fairview or my previous employer, the biggest challenge is really adoption. Google does things differently, and I mean they do it differently from how you compose an email all the way up to how they roll out changes to the underlying platform. From an end user perspective, it's a new experience to them, whether they were using Lotus Notes, Exchange on Outlook, or anything like that. I mean, email was email. It kind of worked a certain way. There was no threaded conversations. that stuff is sort of switching in that market, but I think the Google was kind of the driving force behind the adoption of that kind of thing. So from an end user coming in, their biggest sort of, it's jarring. It's an entirely new environment. It's not an application you load. It's in your web browser. It's very new to people who've been working in a certain way for a very long time. The flip side of that is the younger generation coming in, and the schools are great at this, especially when apps for education is free. The younger generation coming into a company, they pick this stuff up right away. There's no learning curve for them. They just jump right in. They already know what to do. On the other side, more towards IT and administration, I find the IT crowd to be a bit of a sticky bunch when it comes to products like Google Apps. They have a hard time releasing a little bit of the control. They have they're usually the last people to adopt things like Google Drive, just because the IT industry is very systematic, and people do things the way that they do them because they've always done them that way. They do love their new technology, but switching their practices is really tricky. And getting that, I think the biggest challenge with IT people is the sort of rolling innovation that Google does. The senior management always has a hard time understanding that Google does not have a 5-year plan for features that they're going to release. They do not do twice a year patching service packs and stuff like that. They kind of every couple weeks, new features come out. It's really difficult dealing with upper management because of the way that they like the waterfall kind of idea. So it takes some adjusting and getting used to for any IT crowd and the senior management for sure.
So how have you guys managed the rapid release, scheduled release setup with new features when they come out?
So staying on top of what it is that Google's working on, I guess my biggest piece of advice is never miss a roadmap session if Google's going to offer it to you. I mean, 9 out of 10 times, they'll give you 100 items, and I'd say 90 of them probably slide a little bit from what they're actually telling you is the timeline. Nothing against Google, it's the way they work. It takes a little bit of getting used to. But you need to know what's coming down the pipe from Google. Only experience is going to kind of get you to the point where you can really read which of the features Google's thinking about are ones that you're actually going to see in the near future and which ones are actually going to take a decent amount of time. And then you have to sort of manage upwards with your internal management, just saying, we're going to have to sit on this for a while and just stick it out, whereas other times you can gain the confidence to say things like, well, this feature that Google's got is around the corner. We can probably start thinking about switching to that kind of thing. It does take a little experience to kind of be able to read the roadmaps or interpret the roadmaps to be able to deal with management.
Awesome, thanks, Andy. All right, Kevin, we're gonna move right along to you. So, like I mentioned, Kevin Morey from ClearChoice. So we'll go the same structure to you, Kevin. If you could just tell everyone your position there at ClearChoice, and then let us know when and why you guys decided to move to Google Apps.
Okay. Again, my name is Kevin. I am the system engineer here at ClearChoice Dental Implant Centers. We are a nationwide provider of dental implants. So I've got locations anywhere from San Diego to Washington, D.C., and a few places in between, of course. Back in 2011, September, we switched over to Google Apps from Microsoft Exchange. At the time, our Exchange was sitting on some failing hardware, and the cost to repair or replace that hardware was significant enough to allow us some opportunities to seek alternatives, to which Google Apps came up as a prime alternative, just based upon the amount of services, even in 2011, that we were going to get from a Google Apps over a Microsoft Exchange was enticing enough, but the price point was fantastic, and I know it still is today, that if you're on some kind of internally hosted infrastructure, you're definitely going to be saving a lot of money moving over to Google Apps from anything that you might be doing internally.
And then, so the next part of the question, what's been the biggest success and challenge that you've seen personally with Google Apps at ClearChoice?
Our biggest success, and we were trying to narrow down just exactly what we thought was the biggest success, because there's so many different things that you could consider a success. But our biggest success has been the uptime. This is something we don't worry about. I can count on you one hand the amount of times where people were in panic mode because their Gmail wasn't working, and that's been over the last 4 years. So that uptime is a great relief to administrators. I'm in a very small shop. We've got 700 users, and I've got 3 admins working with me. And I'm pretty much the sole Google guy managing that stuff, and we don't worry about it. So that's been our best success, is just not worrying about it. Just like the other folks, adoption really is your biggest challenge. How do you get people to know what the capabilities are that they have in front of them, and how you get them to use the capabilities that they have, whether it's through Gmail, through the Drive, through Google+. There's just a lot of different things that they can take advantage of that they may not know. And being able to provide them that information where it's in such a way that they're going to have the time to sit down and check that out and read that, or they're going to come to a hangout such as this one to try to learn it. Those are the challenges that I think anybody is going to face when they switch over to Google Apps.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to move along to a couple other direct questions. We're going to go back to David for now. You mentioned earlier about the Chromebook deployment. We talked about this for today, about the scale of the Chromebook deployment. Can you tell everyone a little bit about the value that you've seen with the deployment already, and what you hope to see going forward?
Yeah. So just to kind of build upon what Kevin had mentioned, it's sort of, he's a little smaller organization and doesn't need to have a lot of support, and I'm pretty much doing this by myself, and we've gone from 0 to 3,600 devices in the course of 2 months, and I'm still alive, which I think is a huge testament. If you try to deploy that many, of any other platform, you would have significantly more issues. So just that's pretty gosh darn impressive. So I think I alluded to earlier that you couldn't even buy a Chromebook in San Francisco. Purchasing would refuse it. So what's really nice is we have a third-party vendor that does the white glove enrollment for us. They actually put it in the sub-org for us. So once I set up that sub-org organizational structure and have the permissions and stuff and all the settings set up, I do really nothing. These carts appear at a school, and I think we have upward of 63 right now with Chromebook carts. They show up, and they all work exactly the same. That's pretty amazing. And right now I think we're buying a lot of Dells. We have some HPs out there, but like if we decided to go with 100% Acers, we could switch devices on the fly, and the experience would be uniform from device to device. So as far as training teachers, that's huge, especially in a shared environment. San Francisco has about 65,000 students, and we're hoping to get about up to 20% penetration this year as far as technology. So students will go from one class to another, and just to be able to have that continuity of experience regardless of what device. It's not even about Chromebooks if you think about it. If a school decided to go with Windows, launch a browser, you've pretty much got a Chromebook. So to be able to go from class to class, curriculum, and go home and have that continuity is pretty darn huge. But I don't even know when Chromebooks show up. I think last time I checked there were 500 less in the system, and now we have another 500 I didn't even know were being rolled out. And help desk, I think they were joking with me last year. They didn't want any Chromebooks. They couldn't stand it. Purchasing didn't want them. IT didn't want them. Help desk didn't want them. And now help desk wants to practically hug me. The amount of support calls for Chromebooks are so minute, and when they are, it's maybe someone doing a white glove forgetting to take it out of developer mode or something like that. It's the failure rate or issues at a site are pretty much none, and the teachers just love how solid it is as a platform. I kind of talk in analogies, and I equate a Chromebook with like a wooden pencil. It's not glamorous. If it's broken, it's in one. I don't know if you remember in elementary school, they'd have these little tin cans, sharpened and broken ones, and it didn't really matter which one you picked up because they were kind of the same. And teachers like that. You could have you could have a $2,000 gaming machine in the corner, and if it doesn't work 10% of the time, it's not as useful. So teachers constantly come up to me and go, thank you for having a device that just works. And if a kid has a problem, they just grab another one, and the technology kind of disappears from the picture, and it just comes about, tasks and learning, and transition time is minimal. So for me, that's the biggest success, just the ability to kind of scale immediately with minimal resources.
That's great. So since you mentioned that you are new to managing Google Apps, and it's kind of a one-man show over there, what's been, with managing Google Apps, what has Google made easier about the process, or made your life easier about the process, and what's kind of been difficult?
I think the hardest thing is just understanding cloud computing and sharing from a systematic perspective. I think going forward, the hardest thing will be, I think people understand local data. They understand this falls, I give this back, my data's on it. It disappears, my data's gone. And when people are going to be leaving the district or school, like students matriculate and move on, what do we do to accounts? How do we archive it? How do we keep it for e-discovery for how many months, years, that kind of stuff? What are our policies? What if someone returns? Do we suspend? Do we delete? Do we audit if people share outside the domain? Kind of things like that. It would be great. Like, for example, you can restrict sharing outside the domain for a domain, but not organizational units or subdomains. So things like that make it sort of difficult. The ability to do a lot of minutia and granular controls, but then you can't do it for everything. And just in education, it's building the right fences for the right people, but not limiting them too much. But the good thing about Google is it changes all the time. That's a great thing. Like, whatever frustration I have, I almost don't feel like I need to open a support desk ticket, because someone's probably already brought it up, and it probably is in the timeline and on the roadmap. So it keeps getting better. That's the nice thing. Like, you don't have to wait for a dot release. You don't have to worry about buying a new server or getting a new operating system. It just, your organization changes as they do. So
great. Your biggest kind of charge there at Cadillac Fairview is encouraging adoption and training with Google Apps. So what do you see yourself doing differently this time around, or what do you aim to do in terms of training users on Google Apps?
Yeah, this time around I know what I'm doing. Right now I'm in the process of kind of building the strategy of how to manage the adoption. I'm taking 2 routes, and each route kind of has multiple pieces to it. So the first one is training, making sure that there is a full-blown training program. As I said earlier, and I think the other guys mentioned it too, when you're coming from the traditional, we'll call it, environment of Outlook, Outlook Express, Lotus Notes, your standard, what we've been used to for 20 years of email, when you're coming from that into Gmail, it's a bit of a shock. So what I'm trying to put together is an onboarding, welcome to the company kind of, here's Google, and here it is in its glory, your first day, your first week kind of training program, just to get you familiar with the inner workings of Google. Here's how your calendar works. Here's how Cadillac Fairview specifically uses it, is one of the things I kind of want to tailor. Moving on from that, I'm going to do a second level of training, which is more, here's how you become proficient at Google. Some of the best practices, a lot of the user-facing kind of guru stuff, the videos that are posted there. Just tailor them to how Cadillac Fairview interacts with it, some of the tips and the tricks, how to really take advantage of filters and plus labeling, or plus addressing is what I meant. Things like that, some of the power user kind of stuff. And then and the third level is I want to do some regional champions or experts, gurus even. I want to make sure that I'm not the one who has to field every single question. I'm not trying to get out of the job. I want people to be excited about it, and I want them to feel comfortable asking questions to who they want to ask the questions to. And the second kind of path that I'm taking is, I'm still working on the strategy and the wording and everything, but more of a marketing campaign, I guess you could say. I'm a little adverse to just throwing up some posters going, hey, Google, what I'd like to do is kind of interview the employees and figure out where we can actually create some efficiencies, make some success stories out of it, and then market that. Sort of an internal use case kind of scenario. And even I'd like to take a bit of a BA role against it and sit down with a lot of the departments and a lot of even the sub-departments and figure out what it is that they're doing. Just really analyze how they can actually make better use of these things. I mean, the tools of Google are phenomenal. The interaction and the collaboration is just fantastic. But a lot of people don't put the pieces together. I mean, they don't connect how. I'll give you an example. In an older environment, 10 years ago, you would work on a document. Actually, I have the perfect scenario. Friend at a different company. They went to a meeting. He was telling me the story. They went to a meeting, and everybody brought their laptop, and they all open up the screen, and they pull up a spreadsheet, and everyone's working on their own copy of the same spreadsheet. So they'd be like, oh, okay, so, $5,000 for item A. So everyone changes it on their spreadsheet. And then, so there's 12 different spreadsheets all going at the same time. And then at the end of it, one person mails it out. And now there's a 13th copy of this spreadsheet floating around, and everyone's got an extra copy in their email. And I'm not saying I mean, obviously that's not efficient, but they don't really pick up on how the collaboration inside a Google Sheet is going to make their lives easier, We could have more discussion in the meeting because there's only one person who has to actually be the note taker and change the spreadsheet. Or even better, they've all still got their laptop, but once one person makes the change, everybody sees it. It's just defining those kind of efficiencies.
I mean, you touched on a lot of things there, but if you could boil it down to one thing as being the most important lesson that you've learned after being a Google Apps admin at multiple places, what would you say that would be?
Adoption is hard. It is. People don't want to change what they're doing. You have to give them a reason to, and that's not something. You'll see organic growth. It'll happen. I mean, both companies I've been at, they took the same thing. They switched to Google Apps. They turned on every feature, and they just kind of threw stuff against the wall to see what would stick. And 2-3 years down the road, you've got a good picture of what sticks and what doesn't, and then you try and build on that. That doesn't work. That's a slow process. You have to push for that adoption. You have to show people where the efficiencies are, where they can actually benefit from using something like Google Apps. They'll figure it out on their own, but it's slow.
Thank you, Andy. And David, I'm glad we could get you back in here. So, Kevin, I think we'll move over to you now. David talked a lot about their Chromebook deployment, and you guys are kind of approaching devices from the MDN perspective. So, could you tell us a little bit about the mobile device management rollout that ClearChoice is doing, and maybe some successes that you've had already, some challenges, and maybe some recommendations that you could give?
Sure. I would have to say probably about 4 months ago, our compliance started thinking about mobile device management. What are we going to do? We've got all these cell phone users out there. With the advent of the smartphone, anybody in your organization is going to come up with you with an Android phone or an iOS phone, and they're going to start getting to your email. They're going to start getting to your drive. How are we going to protect that data? So at that point, we were kind of on the cusp. Google was on the cusp of getting ready to launch this mobile device management. So we started looking at it, and we were waiting for compliance to kind of pull the trigger. And when they decided to pull the trigger, every question that we had about mobile device management just suddenly appeared inside of Google Apps. It was kismet. It really was. So we've got 700 users. We don't know how many of these users are connected to our mobile right now. So we're like, well, okay, we've got to phase in some kind of an approach. So we start testing, and I definitely recommend, set yourself up with a little test org, put in the different mobile device policies that you want, throw some people in there, kind of see how that plays out for you. So we did that. We did that in really short order. I think it was like a day. And then we were like, okay, well, we've already put 10 people in this test group. Nothing exploded. Nothing bad happened. So I get ready to roll this out, and compliance is asking me, well, how long is this going to take? And I'm thinking, I've got people here that I want to make sure this isn't a problem. The last thing that I want to do is have, anybody in the organization have a blown up phone, or, otherwise have some kind of a negative impact on something that they're, needing to use, not only for, the organization's use, but for their own personal use. So I'm thinking, oh, it's going to take me 2 months. So what I did is I outlined a plan where I was going to notify the users, and I was going to notify the users that this was going to happen. Google kind of made it so easy in that the iOS devices, they're almost seamless for the Google transition. They're actually easier, I would say, than the Android devices, only because the Android device you have to download an application that then gives you that control. The iOS, it's just a certificate that you create, so it's really super easy. So I do this, I notify, and I launch it. And I'm launching it in location by location, and we've got about 29, 30 different locations. So I launch about 3 on the first day, and I get, I don't know, probably 15 to 20 devices come in. Nobody calls me. There's no help desk tickets. There's no problems. So I'm like, well, this is really easy. So then the next day I launched like 10. And then no calls come in. More devices are starting to trickle in on their own. Nobody's having any problems. By the second week, I was completely done with the real en masse deployment of everything. So 2 months into 2 weeks, and the only calls that we've had are by the folks who are a little bit more discerning. They kind of look at the app and they go, hey, this app's going to touch all these things on my phone, which then causes a little bit of panic. Folks are like, you're going to be able to see my pictures. You're going to be able to do this and that. And I'm like, no. We don't see anything. But I can wipe your phone remotely, so you might want to, consider that. But other than that, it was so seamless and it was so easy. And the best part was it was already part of our Google Apps. We didn't pay anything extra for this. This just came fully loaded and ready to go. We were looking at MDM solutions that were in the tens of thousands of dollars that would have required us to reach out and touch these folks, and make sure that everybody's doing it. This allowed us to use our pre-existing communications platform to go ahead and integrate all the mobile devices. The only challenge we've got right now is there's one piece, and if you're thinking about deploying the MDM, this is one thing that you need to know. If you're not doing this already, which I'm sure a lot of Google admins are already doing this by denying POP and IMAP. We had POP and IMAP on. Well, there's a loophole in the iOS device where if you use Google as your account connector for the native mail client, it uses POP. So we have some devices that are lingering out there only because they're using the native mail client. So when we turn off POP and IMAP, which is probably going to knock off the remaining individuals, and we don't expect that many, but if anybody was using a mail client to use to gather their email, that's going to be a problem. But really, from a compliance standpoint, POP and IMAP we probably should have not had on. So turning it off is just going to catch us up with compliance.
Awesome.
Kevin, can I ask you a question actually on that?
Sure.
A big concern that always comes up surrounding mobile device management and connectivity into Google Apps is the third-party OAuth tools. So things like, third-party OAuth clients like Mailbox, Boxer, even the Gmail iOS app. Are you concerned with people using that stuff against their on their mobile devices? And if you're concerned with it, how are you addressing it?
Well, right now, we're utilizing FlashPanel, and we're starting to actually take an active look at what's going on with our users and how they are connecting to apps and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. I think as we move forward, as we work more with our compliance, we're probably going to be starting to limit, in specific ways, people's abilities to connect to the third-party apps. That is a great question, and that's definitely something that everybody should be concerned about. Because you think about it, even in your Chrome, You go into Chrome, you go into you go into the web store, and you're downloading all these tools, and everybody sees those questions. Hey, we're going to connect and look at your email. Hey, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at that. So that's definitely a concern, and certainly one that we're looking into. We haven't fully addressed that yet, but with Flash Panel, even with Google, it's really starting to gear towards the compliance side for those of us that do have HIPAA, us specifically in our backyard, to make sure that what we're delivering to the end user is something that does meet full compliance. One thing that we always caution our users is do not and this is just something that you got to keep preaching over and over, is that do not be releasing EPHI over email. We shouldn't be discussing confidential patient information in that platform anyway, and that's strongly worded in our signature, our confidentiality.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. Kevin, you talked a little bit about on our call before about how your call center employees are actually using Google Plus Communities. Can you kind of expound on that and how they are leveraging that?
Okay, Google Plus is something that when we first started with Google Apps back in 2011, there really wasn't Google Plus. So this technology we've been kind of watching evolve, and we've gotten to a point in our own department where we started to use Google Plus in the circles specifically to go ahead and communicate relevant things that we didn't really need to send emails for. We're making some kind of a change, and everybody knows, okay, we've got this change control, but we're actually going to release this change. It's going to happen right now. It augments the change control system because we're able to communicate those things. So my call center, which they're amazing adopters. I got to shout out to these folks. They are great. I bring them tools, and we sit down, we talked about it for a while. They were seeing, hey, look at what we can do with Google Plus, not just the communities, but in the circles, and how you can use the circles to actually formulate better hangouts, things of that nature. So they really picked up on the communities, and I think somebody's actually asked a question about, if we use sites or, sites as an internet platform. We do use sites as an internet platform, but what we've discovered with communities is we're able to deliver content, and folks are able to deliver content in a much faster way over communities than in the internet site. The internet site is really static. It requires somebody to sit there and actively, manage it left and right. Whereas a community, it's like a site. It's in Plus. But what we're able to do there is we're able to share links, and this is what these guys are doing. They're using it for training. They're using it to schedule events. They're using it to poll their community on different things that they've got going on. And so they're augmenting it with training in the Drive. So if they've got some kind of a training document, they'll post up inside of the community that they've got this training, and here's the link. The folks can acknowledge, they can +1 it, they can comment on it. So it allows for a much deeper, richer collaboration than just having a strict internet site for training. So that's really where they're seeing the value, I think, in that.
David, I think we talked about this before when we were comparing the use of sites and Classroom, the difference between how they're using sites and Classroom.
Just kind of tie back to another comment someone had made where adoption is difficult. Mm-hmm. It's very incremental, and especially in a massive deployment like this, it's keeping realistic expectations. So like this year, like if I can in 12 months get everyone to log in, I think that's a huge accomplishment. I mean, just that. So kind of what I call Classroom is sort of like AOL for Drive. It kind of obscures all this stuff that isn't too complicated, but you don't have to learn like contact management, groups, sites, Drive-in per se. So what I've really been trying to do is highlight what Classroom can do. So I can do like an hour-long PD and take someone from like no experience with Google Apps to pretty much paperless within an hour. And they may not be the best, lessons, but at least they're using the tools more, and it's a great introduction. So for me, because Google has so many tools, it's trying to decide which tools to target when you do professional development. And with 150 some odd locations and 5,000 teachers, there's no way to even hit every school on a daily basis and train them adequately. So I'm trying to find tools to kind of encompass multiple ones. So sites right now are turned on for teachers, but it's kind of clunky. It's kind of got a learning curve. So we've really been trying to get a lot of teachers to use Classroom because it performs a lot of the same functionality. That walled garden without any change of settings. It models social networks they're already familiar with. And it's very easy to make a class. You don't have to integrate with an SIS or anything like that. So for me, Classroom's kind of a gateway tool, and adoption's doing quite well. And as we're getting more devices in students' hands, it's really starting to take off. So for me, it's Classroom replaces, I think I mentioned, a lot of tools. Again, contacts, sites, groups, all that kind of stuff that are pretty heady. Even just doing contact groups are a pretty complicated thing because they need to be maintained and people move in and move out. And even doing groups for business on a huge scale, naming conventions, that kind of stuff. So Classroom has really taken a lot of those issues and made them moot, which I really, really appreciate.
So I think we're going to shift gears a little bit here and just go to some general questions. And we're actually running a little bit low on time, so we'll maybe do one of our discussion questions here and then see if we can get to some of these questions in the Q&A app. What kind of common objections or concerns have you guys heard from people that are used to using Microsoft products, and how do you typically address those people?
In Outlook, everyone always was able to click on the date at the top, and it sorted their emails by when they got them, and same thing with the senders and all that. That's the one thing I found most people miss the most. How do I address that? I send them a nice little cheat sheet on using the advanced search features in Google. They knew what they were looking for. They wanted to find an email from Bob that was sent 3 weeks ago, so they'd sort it by date, and then they'd kind of look through it until they found that one email. I'm like, you're doing a search, but you're doing the work. Get Google to do the work for you. And I show them how to do just a couple of simple examples on search. That seems to sort of make them happy.
I think you mentioned before about how that the difficulty of presenting something that Google does really well, but the problem with communicating that because it's such a big shift from what people are doing normally. So I think we'll try and get to some of these questions here. David, I don't know, maybe you can touch on this. Somebody that has 11,000 students loaded from their SIS via a CSV file, and next year they want to move them from one domain to another. I suppose it's within a district. Any suggestions on how to do this?
I don't know if we get my questions answered if I have them for them, but are they going to a different subdomain, a completely different domain? Are they trying to change user data or just create brand new accounts, or is that clear?
Not that much information. It just says from one domain to another.
Okay. Well, let me just kind of talk domains. So there's a primary domain. Most of us probably know this. There's a primary, you can have subdomains. It sounds like they're trying to move users from one primary domain to another. And school districts that were early adopters into the silo approach, like I know a private school that has students in a primary domain and teachers in another primary domain, which means Classroom is not a possibility.
Right.
So maybe they're trying to address that issue. With a CSV file, it's very easy to recreate the accounts in the new domain, but as far as migrating data, it is extremely difficult. There are some third-party tools out there. I think Backupify has a migration tool. There's another one that escapes my memory. I do have like a 30 or 40 slide deck on how to do it manually. I'm not quite sure the size of the district or school, but student data may not be critical, so that might be one of those things where just kind of file data bankruptcy and maybe do a PD where you transfer the teachers, because there's a way to, like, how about this? If you can get their name, I can actually share my little hack for it. But long story short, migration not easy.
Okay. Well, Lance, if you want some follow-up information there, you can. How about you post that question in the GCon Google Plus community, and I'll make sure to forward that along to David, and he can try and help you out there. Some auditing tools for sharing with everyone in a domain or publicly. I think there's a question here about that.
I can speak on that one. You've got a couple of tools there just inside the Google Admin Console that allow you to take a look at what's happening. If you want to deep dive into what you're really looking for as far as who's sharing and who are they sharing with and what are they doing there, Flash Panel is going to be an amazing tool for you. What it allows you to do is actually take a look at on file-by-file basis or on user basis to see who's sharing and what are they sharing with. You can also set up some policies there that go a little bit beyond what you're able to do in the admin console for Google. So I couldn't speak highly enough of Flash Panel for what it allows us to do in relation to what we already are getting inside of the Google Admin Console.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Let's see.
There's one in there from James Rich about using Google Apps Drive in replacing traditional file servers. I figured I'd jump in and grab that one. If you haven't joined Google Work or Google Connect for Work, there was a discussion about that happened in there not too long ago. I would recommend actually jumping in there and reading that. There was some really insightful stuff that came to light in there. As far as recommendations towards it and apps that can make it easier, everyone's kind of doing something different. I think that the one thing, and I've been preaching this since I heard it, and I can't for the life of me remember who posted it, but they actually mentioned that Google Drive, if you think of it as a traditional file server, you're going to run into a lot of walls, just in terms of how the interface works and how it actually interacts with other users. If you think of it as peer-to-peer file sharing, peer sharing of your files, it actually makes Google Drive make a lot more sense, and it might actually be a little bit easier to sell to your users on something like that. It doesn't address replacing a traditional file server with shared drives and stuff like that, but it certainly gives you a little bit more fuel for how to actually get people to use it better, I guess you could say.
I think one thing because we get this question all the time about mimicking that management with Drive and mimicking a file server. I think the one thing that always seems to come up is that and I understand that a lot of organizations, it doesn't matter what you think about using Google Drive that way, that's what they want to do. If you are using Google Drive that way, you're really limiting what Drive is what you're capable of doing with Google Drive. It's not supposed to be used like a file server. It's supposed to be used more like a peer-to-peer sharing network, like you mentioned, Andy. As far as options and tools for that, Andy mentioned checking out Google for Work Connect and reading up there. I know James mentioned AODocs in his question. We've worked closely with them, and I know that's a great tool that a lot of people really seem to like. So if you haven't checked them out, I think that would probably be a really good option. I think that's just about all the time we have for right now, unless you guys have a question that you want to answer real quick. Anybody?
I see one real quick about Google Plus Communities integrated with an intranet site.
Mm-hmm.
Google Plus Communities are actually part of Google Plus, so I don't really integrate communities inside of an intranet, so to speak. That's a completely different service.
Got it. Thanks, Kevin. And then there was one question that I started here that I'll mention really quickly. Best practices for Google Apps for Education settings. I don't personally have anything, any sort of documentation on that, but I know there are two fantastic Google Apps for Education Google Plus communities where a ton of information is being shared on Google Plus, so I would definitely recommend checking those out. There's a lot of Google certified educators and people in the EDU community that love helping out there with best practices. So with that, we're just about out of time here. I want to thank everybody who joined us watching the roundtable and all the presentations today. I also want to thank our three roundtable participants for joining us today, Andy, David, and Kevin. Thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun having you three here today. So I think that's all we have time for. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Please be on the lookout for more GCon events like this in the near future. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.